My name is Graham Keaton. I'm 51 years old, a veteran financial investigator for a government contractor based in Arlington, Virginia. For the last 24 years, I've worked on some of the most classified anti-fraud cases involving defense budgets, black projects, and overseas wire transactions. Most people call me a ghost, the guy who finds the loophole others think doesn't exist. I've been quiet, reliable, boring even. That's what people like about me. At least it's what my wife used to like, until she didn't. The message came in at 2:17 a.m., a text from my wife of 22 years, Valerie. I was in a hotel room in Brussels wrapping up a month-long audit of a NATO-affiliated logistics contract. I'm sorry, Graham. I found someone else. I'm done waiting for you to come home. He makes me feel alive. We're moving to San Diego. Please don't contact me. Attached was a screenshot of our joint investment account, which should have had just over $684,000 in it. What I saw instead was a balance of $29.43. There was no drama in me, no smashing the hotel lamp, no screaming into the mattress. Just a stillness I'd learned over years of interrogating CEOs and contractors who'd stolen billions under the noses of multiple governments. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed 2 words, understood, goodbye. Then I shut off the phone. The next morning I boarded a plane to DC without informing my office or even logging a return flight. When I landed, I didn't call Valerie. I called Elias, my oldest friend, and the only person who knew about Protocol Mirage, a personal contingency I'd set up nearly a decade ago after investigating a similar high-profile marital fraud case involving a diplomat's wife and a 26-year-old yoga teacher. The phone rang once. Graham? She did it. All right. Initiating Mirage. Don't touch anything. Don't reply to any legal requests. Can you be in Ashburn in 2 hours? I'm already en route. Elias wasn't a lawyer. He was something better. A legal strategist and former IRS field agent turned offshore compliance architect. We had created Mirage together during a weekend of bourbon, chess, and worst-case scenarios. By 11:15 a.m., I was seated in Elias's townhouse in Northern Virginia, a coffee in one hand, a leather file in the other. She drained the Vanguard account, almost all of it. I think she started months ago. Slow movements. She knew what she was doing. She didn't touch the holding LLCs or the crypto wallet, though. Not that I can see yet. Good, because she doesn't know those exist. Elias opened a file labeled GLK Irrevocable Trust 2016. You see, Valerie thought I was a conservative government accountant. She never knew that after 2015, I started quietly moving most of our wealth into vehicles legally walled off from marital claim trusts for my nieces and nephews. Shell entities with real asset collateral, crypto stored in hard wallets, physically located in a Denver safe deposit box. Everything was in compliance with the IRS. Everything declared. Everything invisible. Because invisibility was the first rule of self-preservation. She'll hit you with spousal support claims next, Elias said. Maybe emotional distress, maybe abandonment. She already has. I showed him the court summons emailed from her new attorney, someone based in La Jolla, California. That fast? Her timing was precise. She even pre-booked the court appointment in San Diego County. Elias flipped through the legal brief. They're betting on California jurisdiction because it's more favorable to non-earning spouses, and they're about to realize I'm not a civilian. We both smiled. I had played this chess game before with foreign money launderers, with corrupt contractors, with con artists disguised as CEOs, but never with the woman I once shared every Sunday morning with over blueberry pancakes. The betrayal didn't sting the way most people think it would. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like war, and I was going to win it without ever raising my voice. The next 3 days passed in strategic silence. I didn't call Valerie. I didn't respond to her lawyer. I didn't log into any shared platforms, utilities, or personal banking. Instead, I let Elias run the numbers while I re-entered the United States under a sealed travel order from my agency, which meant, for all legal records, I was still on assignment. A critical detail. Valerie's court filing claimed I had abandoned the marital home with no intent to return. But according to my official employment record and passport logs, I was still under active government deployment. In other words, I had never actually left. The trap was already bending. Elias set up base camp in a private office suite we leased through a law firm in Arlington. By the second day, he'd traced nearly $420,000 in movement between our primary Vanguard account and a private brokerage opened under Valerie's maiden name. The first transfers began 14 months earlier, small amounts. Then, larger withdrawals under the guise of emergency medical expenses, and home repairs. She thought labeling it roof replacement would hide it. Elias scoffed. But the home inspection 2 months ago reported no roof damage, and your property insurance hasn't processed any claim. Classic sloppy laundering, I muttered, reviewing the PDF of statements. But she hadn't stopped there. This is where it gets nastier, Elias said, flipping open a second file. She applied for a joint line of credit tied to your equity in the Arlington home, forged your signature, used a digital notary stamp that expired 2 years ago. I stared at the photocopy. My name, in a signature I hadn't written, approved in a notarized form she must have used Photoshop to reconstruct. They wired $76,000 to a shell construction firm in San Diego. Elias continued. No license, no registered employees, but guess whose name is listed as a silent partner? He turned the page. Brandon Callister, 28 years old, amateur surf instructor, current resident of a luxury rental unit in La Jolla. Recent photos on Instagram showed him sailing in Coronado, sipping mezcal with Valerie and linen shirts that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. They're not being subtle, huh? I muttered. Elias raised a brow. They think you're still on a plane. By the end of the week, we'd compiled the following. Forged documents. 3. Bank fraud incidents. 2. Improper asset withdrawal. 6. Violation of fiduciary duty within a marriage contract. 1. Intentional concealment of funds during pre-divorce proceedings. Confirmed. We've got enough for criminal charges in Virginia, federal mail fraud, and a civil countersuit, Elias summarized. Let's file nothing yet, I said. Not until they feel safe. Strategic delay? Exactly. Let them book their dream home. Let them think they won. That weekend, I drove past our former home in Arlington. It looked almost unchanged from the outside, except for a few details. The garden was overgrown, the porch light had burned out, and the mailbox was overflowing. As I sat in the rental car across the street, an unfamiliar black SUV pulled into the driveway. Brandon. He stepped out wearing my Patagonia fleece, the one Valerie used to borrow on chilly nights. I couldn't help but laugh. She'd even given him my jacket. Back at the office, Elias dropped a final file on the table. This is the part she'll never see coming. Inside was a 2020 amendment to the prenup one Valerie had signed without reading during a refinance process, thinking it was part of the mortgage restructuring. The fine print added 2 clauses. In the event of proven fraud, Valerie waived all rights to spousal support. All disputed funds would revert to the trust assets under GLK irrevocable. It had been reviewed, notarized, filed, and most importantly signed. We'll bury them in their own arrogance, Elias said. We'll do it quietly, I added. No shouting, no scorched earth, just cold, calculated extraction. I looked down at the final clause in the document. In the event of material betrayal, full ownership of all marital assets reverts to the signatory party. Signed, Valerie Keaton. Dated, the 18th of October, 2020. Location, Arlington, Virginia. Witness, Elias Mercer. They were so busy planning their escape, they never thought I might have already built mine. It was a crisp Monday morning when I filed the first motion. Not for divorce. Not yet. We started with an emergency restraining order. Not physical, but financial. The motion, filed through Elias's contact in D.C., federal court, cited immediate risk of dissipation of marital and trust assets by one party, with demonstrated intent to defraud. Attached, 3 years of bank statements, screenshots of forged documents, and a sworn affidavit from Elias detailing the discovery process. Within 48 hours, the judge issued an injunction. Valerie's access to any accounts linked to my name directly or through shell corporations was frozen. Her ability to sell or transfer high-value property was restricted. A formal notice was issued to 3 brokerage firms, her bank, and the escrow agency in San Diego. We didn't tell her. We let the paperwork do the talking. She'll find out when her card declines, Elias said. That's the idea. I wasn't after revenge. Not really. I wanted clarity. I wanted her to feel for just a moment what it's like when the world shifts under your feet. No warnings, no sirens, just a sudden quiet realization that your best-laid plans have already failed. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Valerie. Calling. Not texting. I didn't answer. She tried again. Left a voicemail. Graham 1. There's something wrong with the account. Chase won't give me a straight answer. I know you're overseas, but please, I think something serious is happening. I played it twice. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement. Just fear, wrapped in confusion. Good. That night, Elias and I finalized the forensic audit of the construction company, Brandon had opened under his name. It was a ghost. Registered in Nevada, no EIN, no licenses, no business activity, besides a series of incoming transfers all from accounts previously under our control. Money laundering, plain and simple, Elias said. He's either stupid or confident he's invisible. Maybe both. We prepared the packet for FinCEN, the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and submitted it with a flagged SAR suspicious activity report. Within hours, an investigator at Treasury flagged Brandon's account. By morning, every dollar they'd transferred sat in limbo. 2 days later, the first email came from Valerie's attorney, a boutique divorce litigator in San Diego with a smug name. Cameron B. Rowe, Esquire. Subject: Notice of client financial interruption. Our client reports unexpected account freezes and withdrawal denials related to jointly held marital funds. We request immediate clarification and restoration of access, as these funds are essential for her relocation and new living arrangements. We believe this may constitute financial abuse under California law. Elias laughed. He just gave us an admission of intent to dissipate assets across state lines. Perfect. Now we wait 72 hours. 3 days passed. Then came the second email. This one, less composed. We are prepared to file for emergency spousal support and seek exclusive possession of the marital residence due to your client's absence and demonstrated abandonment. I sent a simple reply through my attorney. Mr. Keaton is currently under a federal assignment and has not legally vacated the home. Any claims of abandonment are factually incorrect and legally premature. We attached a copy of my federal assignment letter, time-stamped and notarized. We also attached Valerie's Instagram post from 2 nights earlier, geotagged at a La Jolla rooftop bar, champagne in hand, with Brandon's arm around her waist. The caption? New chapter. No regrets. You really shouldn't post your crimes in real time. That Friday, we filed the civil countersuit. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, misappropriation, breach of fiduciary duty, attempted asset flight. We submitted the amended prenuptial agreement as Exhibit A. The one she signed and forgot. The one that nullified her claim to anything she hadn't declared before 2020. And we included our final witness list featuring not just Elias, but 3 digital forensic specialists, a notary investigator, and an ethics officer from my agency, prepared to testify that Valerie had repeatedly accessed confidential government files she had no clearance for. She thought this was going to be easy. She thought I'd be gone, that I'd be scrambling from across the globe, that I'd come home stunned and helpless. But this isn't my first forensic puzzle. And she underestimated the one rule every good analyst knows. You never run a scam on someone who spent their career exposing them. The courthouse in Arlington, Virginia was quiet that morning, unusually so. Rain tapped lightly against the windows as I took my seat beside Elias and our attorney, Maya Reddick, a sharp, composed litigator with the patience of a surgeon and the aim of a sniper. At the opposite table sat Valerie. She wore cream-colored linen, her hair curled in a way that used to signal celebration. Her expression was carefully blank, not remorseful, not confident, just empty. Beside her sat Cameron Rowe, her West Coast lawyer imported to impress, not to understand. His slick hair and cufflinks couldn't hide the fact that he looked out of place in a D.C. courtroom. The judge entered. Honorable Sylvia Marks, someone Elias had described as brilliant, unsentimental, and absolutely allergic to drama. Perfect. Today's hearing, Judge Marks began, is to review the motion for temporary spousal support filed by Mrs. Valerie Keaton, the counter-motion filed by Mr. Graham Keaton's counsel regarding marital fraud, and a pending petition for financial injunction. Is that correct? Both legal teams confirmed. Maya stood first, presenting our timeline. Valerie's unauthorized withdrawals, the forged credit application, the LLC connected to Brandon Callister, and the La Jolla property she'd attempted to purchase using diverted marital funds. She moved efficiently, without flair. When she played the security footage, showing Valerie and Brandon removing valuables from the Arlington home at 2 a.m., the judge leaned forward. Do you have the chain of custody on this? The judge asked. All authenticated, pulled from the defendant's security system, which remained active and cloud-synced. She was unaware the feed was still operational, Maya replied calmly. Rowe stood and objected something about privacy. Judge Marks raised an eyebrow. In the petitioner's own home? From a system she failed to disable? Overruled. He sat down. When Rowe presented his argument for spousal support, it was flimsy at best. Valerie had relied on Graham for over 2 decades, was now unable to work in her accustomed lifestyle, and had No access to basic financial resources due to the respondent's abusive withholding of funds. Maya didn't flinch. She waited until he finished, then stood with a single printed email in hand. "Your Honor," she said, "this is a message from Valerie Keaton to Brandon Callister dated 3 weeks ago. In it, she writes, 'Don't worry. Once the La Jolla house closes, we'll both have clean slates. He's too boring to even notice what I took.'" She passed it to the judge. Rose scrambled for a rebuttal. "That message was taken out of context." Judge Marks cut him off. "I'll decide the context, counselor." She read the message silently for a few seconds. Her brow furrowed. Then came the twist. Maya presented the 2020 prenuptial amendment, the one Valerie had signed amid refinance paperwork. Valerie's expression faltered for the first time. She leaned toward Roe, whispering with urgency, "Hippolyte." "Mrs. Keaton," Judge Marks said, "did you read this amendment before signing?" I thought it was related to our mortgage. Yet it was notarized, reviewed by your husband's legal team, and delivered with disclosure documents. Did you object then?" "No, but I didn't know. The court finds the amendment enforceable." Silence fell over the room. Then Maya introduced our final piece of evidence, the FinCEN report linking Brandon to prior suspicious activity, along with IRS confirmation that he had no declared income in 4 years and was receiving regular transfers from Valerie under the category consulting. The judge blinked. "Consulting?" "Your Honor," Maya said dryly, "we have no indication that Mr. Callister is qualified to consult in anything except perhaps surfing." There was a ripple of quiet laughter in the courtroom. Finally, it was my turn to speak, not out of necessity, but symbolism. I stood, calm, plain suit, no emotion in my face. "Your Honor," I said evenly, "I trusted my wife. I spent 2 decades building a life we both could share. I traveled for work to give us financial security. What I didn't realize was that she was carefully, methodically, and with outside help, erasing me from the life I was still working to build. That wasn't a mistake. That was intent." Judge Marks nodded slowly, taking in the weight of my words. Her ruling was swift. Spousal support, denied. Asset freeze, continued. Return of funds, ordered all traceable transfers to be reversed to the original trust. Home ownership, reinstated in my name alone. Criminal referral, filed to the Commonwealth Attorney for charges related to forgery and financial misrepresentation. Valerie didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there quietly unraveling. Outside the courtroom, Roe approached Maya to quietly inquire about a negotiated exit strategy. I didn't even turn around. That night, Elias and I sat on the balcony of his townhouse with 2 glasses of bourbon. "Think she'll fight it?" "No," I said, watching the quiet skyline of Arlington. "She's already out of moves. And Brandon? He'll move on to the next target. The man's a parasite." I sipped the drink and leaned back. But this time, we cut off his food supply early. 3 weeks after the hearing, I returned to the Arlington house for the first time. It was strangely quiet. The rooms were still undisturbed, like they'd been paused mid-sentence. There were dust outlines where art had hung, empty drawers, the smell of expensive candles that had long since burned out. I walked room to room, not with anger, but with curiosity. This was the home we built, the one I maintained, and the one she had almost taken without lifting a single hammer. Upstairs, the master closet was gutted. Nothing remained but a broken hanger and an old box labeled Graham's work files. Inside, a few scattered receipts, a family photo from my mother's birthday in 2008, and a folded note I didn't recognize. It was a handwritten list, not mine, with items like Chasewire at BC LLC. Talk to C. Rowe about pre-split arrangement. Burn utility records before the 22nd of June. Sloppy, but useful. I took a photo and texted it to Elias. Insurance. She left fingerprints everywhere. That afternoon, I met with Agent Renee Fulton, a quiet, relentless investigator from the IRS's criminal division. She and Elias had been cross-sharing files. Brandon Callister wasn't new to this. He'd been on their radar for 2 years, under 3 different names, multiple girlfriends, similar MOs, target wealthier partners, initiate emotional connection, suggest separation or financial independence, extract assets through fake businesses. 2 cases in Florida and Nevada were pending, both lacked hard proof. Until now. "You may have just given us the leverage we've been waiting for," Renee said, tapping a manila folder. Inside, documents Valerie had filed in her name, but linked directly to Brandon's bank routing numbers. She looked at me. "This isn't just fraud anymore. If we can prove interstate coordination and forgery, it's conspiracy. That's federal. Will they arrest her? Maybe not yet, but we'll freeze anything she tries to move next. 2 days later, it happened. Elias called just after midnight. Check your inbox, he said. It was a court summons. Brandon Callister versus Valerie Keaton, filed in San Diego County. He was suing her. Claimed mismanagement of funds, false representation of financial capacity, and emotional distress resulting from deceptive romantic promises. He wasn't just abandoning her. He was turning her into his next legal scapegoat. He's cutting her loose, I said. Classic con man tactic, Elias replied. She's now the fall guy. 3 more days passed. Then Valerie emailed me. Subject line. Please. Graham, I made a mistake. I see that now. Brandon's gone. He drained everything. I didn't know he was doing this to others too. I thought we had something real. You can hate me, but please, I'm begging you not to let me be destroyed. My lawyers dropped me. I'm losing the apartment. If you could just... He didn't finish reading. I forwarded it to Elias. Let the court decide her next move. By the end of the week, the IRS had frozen 2 more accounts, and Valerie's name appeared in a sealed indictment related to misappropriated assets and obstruction of federal inquiry. The charges were light compared to Brandon's, but they were real. I took no pleasure in her collapse, only closure. This wasn't revenge. It was the enforcement of a boundary she never expected me to hold. The night before the final hearing, I drove to the Shenandoah Overlook where Valerie and I had once celebrated our 10th anniversary. It was quiet. Stars pinpricked the sky. I thought about what we were and what we weren't. I thought about the quiet ways love can erode. Not in shouting matches, but in withheld truths, secret accounts, long absences filled with someone else's company. Mostly I thought about peace, and how I'd finally earned it. 6 months passed. Autumn had settled over Western Virginia with the kind of gold-bronze crispness that makes you forget the weight of summer. I had moved not just houses, but entirely out of the world I once occupied. The townhouse in Arlington was sold. The trust was closed. Assets liquidated. Investments redistributed. I now lived in a quiet cedar cabin on the slope of Tazewell Ridge, a place no one except Elias and my attorney knew about. No cameras. No security feeds. No signatures to forge. Just silence. And pine trees? Each morning began the same. Coffee brewed over an open flame, the smell of firewood drifting through the kitchen, the sound of crows reminding me that not all warning signs come in silence. I chopped my own wood now, repaired my own roof, relearned the value of doing with less, not out of necessity, but out of clarity. The world I came from filled with passcodes, consultants, encrypted documents, scheduled calls at 3 a.m., still existed, but I didn't belong there anymore. One morning, I opened the final letter from the courts. Valerie had accepted the plea deal. 5 years of probation, mandatory restitution payments, no contact, no claims on assets. She had signed the agreement without trial. Her attorney filed a statement acknowledging willful misrepresentation, financial exploitation, and failure to disclose material relationships. I stared at her signature, the same looping V I once thought charming, and felt nothing. No anger, no grief, only closure. Elias called that afternoon. Heard the news? About Brandon? Gone. Caught boarding a flight to Belize under an alias. U.S. Marshals picked him up in Houston. He's facing wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Might get 12 years. Good, I said simply. So, what now? Now I build something real. That night, I walked out onto the deck and looked over the edge of the ridge. Below, the lights of distant farmhouses flickered like stars reversed. There were no court dates looming, no frozen accounts, no lies breathing down my neck, just air, clean and honest. 2 weeks later, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was from Christina, a woman I'd dated briefly back in 2002, before Valerie. We'd reconnected briefly at my mother's funeral 5 years ago. Nothing came of it, just a hug and a kind word. Inside, she wrote, I heard what happened. I won't pretend to understand all of it, but I remember the man who stayed late to fix my mother's porch when it was freezing. I remember how seriously you took honesty, and how rarely you expected praise. If you ever want to talk not about what you've lost, but about what you've learned, I'd be glad to listen. Yours, C. I folded the note and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Some wounds don't close all at once. They heal a layer at a time. And some lives don't restart with noise and triumph, just quiet, steady decisions to live better. The last snowfall of the season came in early November. I lit the fireplace and sat with a bourbon in hand, watching the world outside turn white. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a spy or a strategist. I wasn't even someone's ex-husband. I was just Graham Keaton, 54 years old, alive, whole, and finally, free.